to meet you. I am
Same here.
Emmanuel K. Dogbevi. I'm the managing editor of Ghana Business News. I've been working as a journalist for 30 years, and I founded and edit Ghana Business News, and I also run a non-profit media organization called News Bridge Africa. And I basically do journalism training and training in communication, strategy and skills. We are based in Accra.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you for your introduction. So, because of your history with your background in journalism and all the work you've done, that's why we invited you, because we would like to hear your ideas about the topic. So the idea of this interview actually came about when I was in Accra. I was in Accra for the work for Dr. Monk. 1 second, I will move the participants. So like this. So I was for Dr. Monk. I was in Ghana at the beginning of the Corona crisis. So I was left at the point that I had to decide on whether to stay in Accra or go back to the Netherlands. And in this time, I was looking at a lot of information and trying to make up my mind what would be the correct decision. And it was astonishing to me that a lot of news was sent around in WhatsApp groups and WhatsApp messages. And most of the things I read, I believed, and later to hear that they've been debunked or that there was fraud or something going on. So I was quite surprised about the amount of fake news going around. So I was interested to see, or we as Dr. Monk were interested in how big is the issue of fake news in Ghana and what can you as a citizen do to get access to trustworthy information. So maybe you can explain to us what is fake news and what are the different types of fake news that exist. Emmanuel.
Right, thank you very much. I think the phenomenon of fake news isn't new. It's always been with us. What's made it look like it's such a huge thing is the current technological advancement we have with regards to social media and internet and easy access and the fast rate at which information flies. So when false or fake news breaks, it goes faster and it reaches out to a lot more people than normal. In the past, I remember in one class where I was doing training in fact checking, and I reminded the class about a newspaper called News of the World. Uh, very widely circulated around the world with really salacious news, very, very sensational information about UFOs and how UFOs came into the earth and who saw them and who did what with them and who said what to them. And people subscribed to this newspaper from all over the world. And there were people in Ghana who subscribed to this newspaper and were happy to read it because the stories were sensational and they tickle your fancy. And again, it's easy for people to do what is known in social psychology as confirmation bias. People believe in things and they're looking for opportunities to confirm these biases or these fears or expectations. So it's easier to hear from a third party that, oh yeah, what you've always believed is true. Someone else has said it. So if someone else has said it, it gives it a certain amount of credibility because, well, now someone else knows about it. So it must be true. So that's what makes fake news go so fast and so quickly. And it's sensational. People like sensational things. As a journalist who has worked on a lot of really hard stories, difficult stories over the years, I find myself wondering if people really know what's important, because I would have spent days and weeks and months working on a story. and then the story is published, and very few people read it, or very, very few people talk about it. And then you find a story that isn't true, but because it's sensational and it's all over the place, and sometimes major news networks fall for it. I remember years back, a major national TV station carried a news broadcast that the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, was dead. And that was from a fake website. And they carried it on the news, prime time news at 7 p.m. Uh, there are different forms of fake news, if you want. There are news that are fake because somebody contrived them. Nothing happened, but they would say something did happen, and they make it up. And then we have false news because they may publish something that might have happened, but may not publish the facts as it happened. They publish what you might want to call alternative facts, just for personal or other reasons. And for most websites, it's for clickbaits. And then there is misleading information, where people share information knowing very well that it will meet certain target of people's unintended expectations. So someone has been arrested and released, but they want to probably create the impression that the person either was locked up in prison, or the person bribed the police to be released or something. So they would make up stories to mislead the public, just to create the impression like the person is evil, or the person is bad, or the system is corrupt, just to mislead people with deliberate intentions of misleading people.
Yeah,
So,
so okay. You've given some reasons why people spread fake news, but who are the people spreading fake news? Is it just people, or is it also newspapers, governmental bodies? Who is involved in the spread?
well, there are people who spread fake news deliberately because it brings them clickbaits. They know the news is fake, but they know, this is sensational. A lot more people will read it. And they get a lot of clicks on their websites. And then there are people who spread fake news because they don't know it's fake news. It's simply sensational. And for them, sensational news must be true. It's so sensational that it is true. Uh, 2 days ago, I called a friend I haven't spoken to in a while to check on him. And he raised this issue about, oh, I've heard they said 5G also spreads coronavirus. So I had to take time to educate him on what the technology is, mobile technology, and the fact that it uses electromagnetic radiation and waves, which is all around us, and what the nature and structure of a virus is, and why it is inconceivable that 5G technology will be responsible for spreading coronavirus. It's inconceivable. It's not real. It's not true. And he got a little convinced. As to whether he was really convinced, I don't know. But people want to believe something. They want to justify what's happening. They want to find a reason to say, okay, so this is happening because of A, B, C, D. But why is it happening? They can't easily find answers. And then somebody provides an answer that's not true, that's not factual. But it goes to feed into their expectations and hopes. And so they run with it. It gives them a certain sense of comfort, or it gives them a certain sense of um, being able to put blame on who is responsible for the calamity. And we've even seen world leaders doing the same, using fake information to attack other countries and blame them for being responsible for creating the pandemic and so on and so forth. So all kinds of people spread fake news. People who are ignorant, people who felt the news was entertaining enough and thought that their friends should also share in the entertainment. And then people who know it is fake news but deliberately share it because it brings them clicks.
Yeah, so in this time where people like to believe sensational news, they get really into conspiracy theories. I've also heard these stories about the 5G and Chinese conspiracy and all those things. I've seen them. How important is good journalism during emergencies such as the unfolding corona crisis?
Well, good journalism has always been extremely important throughout history. There is no particular time that we would say, oh, because of this circumstance, good journalism is important. Good journalism has always been important. It doesn't have to be only because of a crisis. And what makes good journalism important is because of the basic principles of journalism: seeking truth and seeking truth at all costs and at all length, pursuing truth and objectivity, and presenting facts as they exist. That's something nobody can take away from journalism. You can't change it. You change it, you don't have journalism. Journalism is journalism. It is what it is. It is what pursues the truth, the facts, you know. And in the trainings that I do, I always tell the journalists, do whatever you can to get as close to the truth as possible. That's journalism. Journalists don't publish hearsay. I'll give another example. About 2 or 3 days ago, news broke in the US about a Ghanaian official who was involved in bribery and was charged by the SEC in a court in New York. And he was described as a former Goldman Sachs banker. His name was there, all right, and his name was published because he holds dual citizenship. He's a U.S. and an Ghanaian citizen as well. So some news organizations could have gone beyond the story to find out who this person was, but they went ahead and carried the story using former banker, you know. But what I did was to find out who it was, and I discovered he is or was the managing director of the Tema oil refinery, the country's only oil refinery. And so my headline was "Tall Managing Director Charged with, violations of anti-corruption, U.S. anti-corruption law." So if, as journalists, you get information and you don't do the extra leg work of trying to dig further, to verify, to find extra information, to contextualize the information, you are not likely to be able to produce the facts as they are. And it's the same thing with fake news. If you are a journalist and you run with every information without doing due diligence, without doing what journalism requires you to do, you are very likely to fall prey to also sharing fake news or false information.
Yeah, so how do you as a journalist then what do you base your sources on in a time of Corona where a lot of fake news is spreading? Are your sources mostly national sources? Are those the World Health Organization? Is it international sources? And how do you know that they are trustworthy?
Well, for a journalist, your first instinct is not to trust anybody. You should have a very high sense of skepticism,
Yeah.
irrespective of who your source is. So for me, the mantra is doubt, doubt, doubt until you can verify, verify, verify. Whether it's WHO or Johns Hopkins University or the government of Ghana, I treat every information with a certain amount of suspicion until I can delve deeper and be able to verify. Uh, Having said that, I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was confusion about the figures about how many people were confirmed infected in Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was published on there is one website where they call Weldometer, where they have updated data on countries as the reports come out. But the data didn't reflect on the official website in Ghana where confirmed cases were reported. So people started using that one, but then because it wasn't on the official website, people were doubting it. So I went on the Johns Hopkins University website to check, and they were using the same figures as the Worldometer. So I decided to use the Johns Hopkins data. And then a few hours later, Johns Hopkins deleted that figure, right? It
Yeah.
changed. So I was like, okay, so Johns Hopkins was my go-to when I
Yeah.
wasn't even sure of the government's figures and statistics. And now Johns Hopkins have found itself in this data milieu where there was confusion over the figure they were publishing. Um, and then, of course, since then, I became extra careful even using data from Johns Hopkins. So if I have to do stories on confirmed cases on Ghana, I wait till the official website is updated, uh, and then I use it. Of course, I also try to compare other specific information which has nothing to do with the confirmed numbers of people infected, like the nature of the virus, how it affects people, how you can easily get infected, how people can transmit it or infect others, and so on and so forth. There are various schools of thought about how the infections occur. Uh, Most virologists, immunologists, epidemiologists don't even know to date how the transmission occurs. Some say you can get it when someone who is infected speaks to you or when he breathes on you. And then some to say, oh, well, the most dangerous part is the first 2 days of an infection where the infected person himself doesn't have symptoms and doesn't know he or she is infected and then can infect others. And then there is this other one which says asymptomatic people who have the virus but don't show any disease, signs of illness are even more dangerous because they are not ill. They have the virus, so nobody knows that they have the virus, and therefore they can transmit it. So there is so much information, and you need to sift through all this information. And as a journalist, you need to use your track record of experience in assessing information so you don't get it wrong. And these are trying times. These are difficult times. There's so much information around. There's so much confusion around. And if you're a trusted journalist and you're not careful and you publish information that is not verified and properly ascertained, you are more likely to create more damage to your reputation and more confusion in the system.
Yeah, so are there any kind of reliable sources of information available for the Ghanaian citizens to check up on the current corona developments? Or should they get their news from newspapers or?
Well, like I did say in the beginning of this conversation, if journalists did their work well, the public would trust them. The public will rely on them because the processes of journalism require that you can only publish verifiable facts. In other words, if you publish any story, if I go as another journalist to look into the story, I should find the same facts. I shouldn't find anything different from what you published. That's all that there is to it. So if the media, newspapers, radio stations, of course, a lot of people listen to radio than they read newspapers. And during this time, the newspapers aren't really publishing much. Even the leading newspapers in the country aren't doing a lot of circulation. They have drastically reduced their circulation. More than half of their staff are at home because they can't publish. The readers are all staying at home, and we don't have an efficient distribution system where they can distribute newspapers to homes. And it's offices that buy newspapers a lot, and most people read the newspapers when their offices buy them. And the offices are all closed down, so newspapers can't actually sell. So the radio stations and news TV stations and online sources have become some of the main sources of news. But of course, then again, unless and until journalists do due diligence and do their job as professionals, they may not be very useful to the population when it comes to news on the virus.
Yeah, so as you said, a lot of people actually have troubles believing the news that is put out. They have their questions. They try to prefer the dramatical and the sensationalized stories. So how do you as a journalist deal with this? How do you as a journalist build credibility with your readers?
Like I said, you've got to be consistent. Consistency is important in building credibility and trust in your readership. Um, if you publish a story today and then the next day you apologize and retract, and you do it 2, 3, 4 times in a year, each time you publish a story, your readers will think twice before they believe you, right? So you don't get it wrong all the time if you follow the process.
Yeah.
You double check, you triple check, sometimes you quadruple check to make sure the information you are putting out there is factual. If you do that, you won't publish misinformation and you won't publish fake or false news, and you will have no credibility issues.
So maybe a bit of a difficult question, but with media houses sometimes, maybe unpurposefully, spreading fake news. Do you think it's the responsibility of the media houses and the journalists, or of the reader to understand the reliability of the article?
As a matter of fact, a journalist has no business publishing fake or false news.
Yeah, I agree.
you yeah, you have no business. You have no rights whatsoever, morally, ethically, legally, to publish false news, because by your training and by the processes of journalism, you should, if you tick all the boxes, you won't miss it. um, and some of the reasons why journalists publish false or fake news is, you know, running to be the first to break the news. And what I tell journalists all the time is, you are better off verifying the information than being the first to break the news, and then breaking fake news. Being the first to break the news is not journalism. Being the first to publish facts is journalism. And if taking your time to verify the facts will make you put out good information out there and reliable information, that's what you should do. Because if you keep publishing fake news or false information, then you are not doing journalism, one. And two, you lose your credibility. And three, you are likely to harm your readership, because if you misinform people, they're likely to take the wrong actions, and the consequences could not be good for everyone.
Yeah. So, what would you say has been the impact of fake news in Ghana?
Well, fortunately, we haven't had major impacts where you could say this really devastating outcome is as a result of fake news. But you have a lot of people going around with misinformed, notions of things and how things work, which doesn't help in their decision making. If you feed your people with wrong information all the time, you dis you weaken their ability to make the right choices and the right decisions. Then they make wrong choices and they suffer some consequences. There was news in the beginning that if you drink a lot of water and the virus is in your throat, it will get into your tummy, and the acids in your stomach will
Yeah.
destroy it. I'm like, what? Where from this one? And there were a lot of information like that on the internet, and I haven't seen any journalists share that information, but I wouldn't be surprised if some did share them. And then there was information. Well, this was not fake news, but it's rather surprising that a medical doctor did say at the beginning that the virus cannot stand the heat in Ghana because we are blessed with the hot sun.
Mhm.
So Ghanaians should relax, and tourists can come to Ghana and it's cool because the weather is so hot that the virus will not survive. Uh, this is a medical doctor, head of a medical institution. Either he was deliberate or he was ignorant. I can't tell, but that's what he said, and it was captured in the news. And no reporter challenged him because probably the reporters who were there didn't know the full facts of how the virus, you know, can't be destroyed by heat or by the sun or so forth and so on. So all these kinds of things exist where journalists find themselves in their inability to, double check information given by officials, also carry across misinformation, misleading information to the public. Because if this guy is a medical doctor, then whatever he says must be true. And the journalist doesn't think that it's in his right to question the medical doctor who was misleading the public, and so on and so forth. But journalists should question everybody, irrespective of who is speaking, until they can establish the facts of the information the individual is giving.
Yeah. So, fake news, it's not only in Ghana the case, makes people often question the news that the governments are putting out. Do you feel fake news has consequences for the democracy in Ghana?
Yes, fake news has serious consequences for democracy in Ghana. And what are some of the threats of democracy? Possible instigation of violent conflict, for instance. Fake news can lead to conflict. I remember during one of the trainings I was doing last year on conflict reporting, one of the reporters shared an experience with us about how they went to they were invited to a press conference, and they were invited in the bedroom of a local chief. The press conference was held in a bedroom in a conflict situation, right? So if he misleads the journalists, they are likely to carry maybe misinformation to the public. That
Mhm.
itself could instigate other people to into conflict, and that's not acceptable, right? So fake news, false news hold some risks and consequences to conflict, lead to misunderstanding, lead to misinformation, and make people act otherwise, contrary to
Mhm.
how they should be acting.
And are there consequences for people that are spreading this fake news? Can you, what happens to a doctor that says this? Is he just allowed to say it, or is there call to action?
Well, I believe by now this medical doctor has been proven to have misinformed the public, but nothing has happened to him. He still occupies that executive position. I
Mm,
haven't heard any official reaction. I even heard that yesterday a minister also misinformed the public during a press conference on the virus.
okay.
So the question is, did he know he was misinforming the public, or he was just simply ignorant?
Yeah.
You can't trust politicians, so I don't know what to say or make of it. Uh, but there are laws, I think, in Ghana against circulating or spreading false or fake news. Uh, I read somewhere in the news that some guy or some guys are standing trial in the courts for spreading false news on the virus. I haven't read that story yet, but yes, there are laws under Ghana's in Ghana where people can be prosecuted for spreading false news.
Yeah. So, in the light of also in official press conferences and the spreading of fake news in that as well, I think it might be interesting to move towards what people can do themselves to find out the correct news. And so, how can you, through good journalism, create an engaged and critical citizenry that is proactive in this crisis?
Well, verifying information is a lot of work, even for professional journalists. Sometimes it's also expensive. Uh, so a lot of people don't want to spend time to verify information, and therefore they believe every and any information that fits into their narrative of the nature of things and how things are going or what is happening. So for ordinary people, I always tell them, don't believe everything till you can verify. Speak
Mm-hmm.
to your networks. Try to look for other credible sources to see if they have published the same information. If you are in doubt, talk to at least 2, 3 people and try to find out if indeed they think what is being announced or the news out there about a specific incident is true or not. But how many people can do that? Not many people can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, People are busy minding their business. People are busy, especially in this time. People are really struggling to survive, considering the fact that almost 80% of Ghana's economy is informal, and people are struggling to figure out how they can make a living.
Yeah.
Uh, Prices of food and goods have gone up, and people have actually some people have run out of money and food at the moment. So they don't have that extra strength to try and be concerned about whether they want to verify the news information or not. They take whatever they get and run with it until probably somebody more informed comes to tell them that the information you are depending on is false or it's fake.
Yeah. So, um, to do you feel there is a way to tackle fake news in this Corona time?
Yes, there is a lot there are a lot of ways we can tackle fake news in this time by consistently doing good journalism, by consistently engaging the public and communicating facts. And also, I believe that we can also do that by doing journalism literacy training for the public to understand what journalism is, so that they can separate ordinary normal gossip information from journalism information. And then they'll be able to tell once they see information and they don't see the traits, the quality that makes it journalistic information, they will be able to say this is not factual because it doesn't have what will make it factual. In the trainings that I do, I also make the journalists do their own investigations, pick up a story, determine what the facts in those stories are, and establish whether those facts have been verified. And most of them come out quite enlightening. It's like, oh, wow, I've looked at this story before, but now I'm looking at it differently because I can see that these facts put in the story have not been verified by the journalist. He probably heard it from someone and he's just put it out there as it is. So by educating the public, by being consistent, hopefully the public will get to learn and be able to protect themselves from being misled by fake news.
Right. That is interesting. So you say actually a large, correct me if I'm wrong, a large responsibility of the stopping the spread of fake news lies with one, the journalists and the media houses, and two, people that can facilitate a media training for the citizens.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, but still, in this time, do you have places or sites or things where you can find credible news? If you want to know what to do, how to behave in the Corona time.
Yes, I mean, the World Health Organization is one of the main sources I go to. Johns Hopkins University's website is one of the other places I go to. And the third place I would go is the Ghana Health Service website.
Okay. And when you, as a normal Ghanaian citizen, encounter fake news, is there something you can do?
Well, if I encounter fake news, I don't share it with anybody. I don't spread it. And if I find people sharing and spreading it, I find it's sometimes very difficult to point out to people that the information they're sharing is false because they have so much confidence in it and they're excited in sharing it. So trying to draw their attention that it is fake news is like interfering with their excitement, and people can get irritated sometimes. So it's a difficult thing, but sometimes I try to find ways to draw their attention to the fact that, hey, the information you're sharing is not true, it's fake news. Um, I also tell people things like, if you see any story on a website, check the URL. If it's a good website, if it's a credible website, it will have a security. It will be the security will be strong. You will see that the URL has HTTPS. There is an S at the end. If you see a website
Right.
that doesn't have S at the HTTP, then you should be wary of that website. And then you should also find out what the details of who owns the website, like the contact page. Are they a known news website? Have they been in existence for long? How long have they published things like this? Have they published a similar thing in the past? Anybody else publish anything like that? And you can do the comparison, be able to, and then be able to determine if these people are publishing facts or just fake news.
Yeah. So, would you say there's a large distinguishment between misinformation and fake news, or can it all be grouped as one?
No, there is a large distinguishment. There is a large difference. Fake news is something someone has contrived, something someone has made up out of his wildest imaginations. You know, that's fake. It didn't exist. He created it. He made
Yeah,
it
yeah,
up. Misinformation is taking a fact and twisting it to achieve an unintended or a more different consequence or expectation than what it is meant for, you
Mhm.
know. So you take the fact, but then you twist it to meet a different objective. That's misinformation. So, for instance, when people were told to wash their hands, then somebody say, "Oh, uh, it doesn't matter. You can wash your hand, but you don't need to. It doesn't have to be running water. Water is water." That's misinformation, right? But the emphasis is on running water, so that once you wash with the running water, if there are pathogens on your hands, they get carried away. You can wash your hands in a bowl, for instance, because that bowl might contain water, but it's not running water. So you are not likely to have washed off the pathogens off your hands. You
Mhm.
are likely to get infected if they are on your hands and you wash in a bowl containing water. You are likely to carry them back on your hand or something, you know. So somebody could say, "Oh, well, they say wash your hands with water. Even if you don't have running water, you can use water in a bowl." That's definitely something I would call misinformation.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe a more fun question. What is the uh, funniest or weirdest or craziest fake news you've seen in the last few weeks around Corona?
I I I don't think I've heard any weird or funniest news or anything like that. But I've really read some crazy stuff on the internet where
Yeah.
someone said something like, well, they said about 80 people have recovered. So what's the point in keeping us locked down? Let us get out there and get on the streets. Because 80 people have recovered in Ghana, you know. That's crazy, really. And some people actually believe that, some religious people believe that the virus is a demon, it's an evil spirit, that prayer and the fire of God can destroy, you know. So for them, they don't look at it from the medical point of view, they look at it from the spiritual point of view. Of course, in the beginning, when this virus pandemic broke out, there were people who said, "Oh, it doesn't affect black people.
Mhm.
It's only for non-black people, and so on and so forth." So I've heard crazy things being said, but uh, I can't remember anything funny yet, except some of the crazy things that people have put out there on social media.
Yeah, the conspiracy theories.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
but what you're saying is interesting actually. I've seen it a lot that and I don't think it's surprising, but it is happening. That because of this crisis and people are looking for somebody to blame, like you said
Yes.
before. So I feel actually that a lot of people are becoming very racist or excluding in this whole pandemic. Also in news media and outlets.
Yeah.
So that is something very worrying in my opinion.
Well, there's a lot to be worried in a pandemic, especially where people, when they are misinformed, can actually exacerbate the spread of infection because they are not taking the right steps, they are not taking the right decisions, and so on and so forth. Like some people, some religious groups say, "Well, you can stop us from meeting. Our God is more powerful than this virus. We are going to
Hmm.
meet, by the way, and we will go to our gatherings and do our spiritual activities because this virus cannot stop us." Yes, people have the right to exercise their religious beliefs, but under circumstances like this, where we have a virus, a pandemic ravaging the rest of the world, including systems with really well-established health institutions and systems falling victims and losing thousands and thousands and tens and thousands of their citizens to the disease. If you come from a country or societies where you don't have extremely well established health systems and your health systems are, well, you could say dysfunctional or not as
Hmm.
functional as they should be, you don't want to take chances. You want to be extremely careful. Yes, you can have your beliefs and think that the virus is a demon, and the demon, you can pray and destroy the demon. But they say don't go in large crowds. Stay away, stay home, and stay safe. Don't mix up with people. Wash your hands, use sanitizers, keep improve your personal hygiene, and so on and so forth. You should do that. You should observe all these things. You can still keep your belief and religious inclinations, but
Hmm.
practice what will keep you safe, as the medical people are suggesting and recommending.
Yeah, that's very good information. So to round it off and maybe to give even more advice, what message do you want to give to the Ghanaian population right now?
I would say for Ghanaians that these are difficult times. These are trying times for everybody, considering the fact again that about 80% of Ghana's economy is informal. So for most people at home now in the areas under lockdown, that's the Greater Accra and the Greater Kumasi area, that's a lot of difficulty, a lot of pressure on their finances and their way of life. But it's better to stay safe and healthy and not get the virus in your circumstances. I know it's difficult. People are trying to help. Churches are trying to help. NGOs are trying to help. The government itself is trying to help by providing food for people who can't afford to feed themselves in these times. Ordinary people are helping others as well. People are helping their friends. That's what we have to do as humans. These are difficult times. We all need to stretch our hands out there and help people in need. Don't wait for someone to come to you to ask for help. If you see someone needs help and you can afford to help them, go help them. Share what you have with people. Support other people so we can all survive and beat this virus, and then we can get our lives back again.
Oh, thank you. That was really nice, inspirational.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah. So, Elizabeth, do you have some questions, or Emmanuel, do you have some questions?
No, I think he's spoken very well and elaborately on the issues. So I feel like everything has been touched on. So yeah, good. I wanted to ask about the misinformation and then fake news. So and you asked that, marriage. So that has been answered. So yeah.
The chicken. And
Yes.
Emmanuel, do you have some questions for us, or is there something else you would like to share or talk about?
Well, no, I think I'm fine. We've had quite a useful conversation, and I believe your viewers and listeners will benefit from this conversation and learn from it as well. These are difficult times. The decisions taken by governments are tough on the governments themselves, but so far the best way that has been identified by which we can avoid contracting or getting infected by this virus is to social distance. And let's all do as much as we can to social distance so we can preserve ourselves. If we live today, we will live for another day and we will get back our lives. I'm hopeful about
All right. Thank you. I think
that. You're welcome.
we can round off. So thank you again, Emmanuel, and thank you, Elizabeth, for joining me. And yeah, I will say I will stop the recording.